Okay, so has this ever happened to you? You get this weird deja vu moment, or you catch a shadow doing something it shouldn't, or some coincidence lines up so perfectly it almost feels planned. For most of history, people just chalk this stuff up to ghosts or fate or God. But now, in the age of computers and video games, we've got a new, way creepier explanation floating around. What if your whole life, everything you see, feel, remember is basically just a render?
Think about how video games actually work. In a big open world game, the developers can't load the entire map at once. Your console or PC would just die. So they use a trick called occlusion culling. Basically, the game only bothers rendering what's directly in front of your character's eyes. That city block behind you, it's not really there. It's just sitting as code, waiting. The second you spin the camera around, boom, it pops into existence. For years, this was just a neat programming trick, nothing more. But the deeper we dig into physics, the weirder it gets, because it looks like the universe might be pulling the exact same move.
To really get into this, we've got to zoom way, way down to the smallest stuff in existence. Down there, all the normal rules of physics you learned in school just stop applying. It's a totally different game, and it's called quantum mechanics. The classic example everyone points to is the double-slit experiment. You fire tiny particles, electrons, photons, whatever, through a wall with two slits cut into it. And weirdly, they don't act like little bullets, they act like waves. One single particle can somehow go through both slits at once, and it creates this rippling wave pattern on the screen behind it. In other words, the particle doesn't actually have one fixed spot. It's just floating around as a cloud of possibilities, unrendered basically, a blur of maybe here, maybe there. But here's the kicker. The second you try to measure it, the second you set up some device to catch which slit it actually went through, that whole wave thing collapses. No more ripple pattern. It just snaps into being a normal, solid little particle, like it was caught cheating. Now, a lot of pop science stuff and YouTube mystics run with this and say, see, your mind creates reality. That's just wrong, honestly. It's a total misreading of the science. The wave doesn't collapse because a human looked at it with their eyeball or their soul or whatever. It collapses because of a physical interaction. The moment that tiny particle bumps into something bigger, a measuring device, or even just a messy, hot environment, it loses that fuzzy quantum state. It locks into one real, solid answer. So reality isn't solidifying because you looked at it, it's solidifying because something physical forced it to decide. But here's the question that just won't leave you alone. Why does the universe sit there in this undecided probability soup state until something forces it to lock in an answer? Why does that sound so much like a game engine sitting there waiting for a signal to load the next frame?
Back in 2003, an Oxford philosopher named Nick Bostrom took all this weirdness and turned it into an actual formal argument. People still argue about it today. He called it the simulation trilemma, basically saying one of three things has gotta be true, no way around it. Option 1, we all die out first. Maybe every civilization, human or alien, wipes itself out before it ever gets advanced enough to build simulations of its own history. And honestly, look around. Climate stuff, nuclear risk, AI going sideways. It's not crazy to think something takes us out before we ever get the tech to simulate anything. Option 2, they just don't care. Maybe some civilization does survive, gets crazy advanced, has all the computing power in the world, and just isn't interested in simulating their primitive ancestors. Think about it from their side. Would some godlike, immortal, galaxy-hopping society really want to watch a simulation of us stuck in traffic and stressing about rent? We might be about as interesting to them as an ant farm is to us.
Option 3. We're the simulation. If option 1 is false, civilizations do survive, and option 2 is false, they do run simulations, then Bostrom says we're basically forced into option 3. Almost every conscious being like us is living inside a simulation, not the real original world. And the logic isn't just vibes, it's a numbers game. If even one advanced society decides to simulate their past, they're not going to stop at one. But that kind of computing power, they'd run millions, maybe billions of these simulations at once, each one packed with billions of conscious little people. And those simulated people might build their own computers and run their own simulations inside their simulation, like Russian nesting dolls, but infinite. So now you've got one real original world and a mind-blowing number of fake copies, which means statistically, the odds that you happen to be living in that one original world instead of one of the billions of copies, basically zero. Bostrom's argument is genuinely clever. It's a great mental workout, but we gotta be honest. It's built on some shaky ground, and the biggest crack is something called the principle of indifference. His whole math thing only works if you assume a simulated mind and a real biological mind count the same, statistically speaking. That leans on an idea called substrate independence, the belief that consciousness is just information processing, so it doesn't matter if it's running on a wet human brain tissue or a silicon chip. Same difference. But that's a massive assumption nobody's actually proven. We still don't even know how consciousness works in a regular human brain, let alone whether you could copy it onto a computer. And there's another problem. Bostrom assumes you'd never be able to tell the difference between the real world and a simulated one. But what if base reality has some kind of hard physical limit? Or what if running a simulation forces some kind of shortcut or glitch that would eventually show itself? If that's true, this whole "we're almost certainly simulated" math falls apart. You can't calculate the odds of something happening in a universe when you don't even know the rules of the universe hosting it. Even with those holes poked in, physicists keep finding genuinely strange stuff about how structured our universe is. The biggest one? Math works way better than it has any right to. Everywhere you look, the universe is doing math. Spiral galaxies, DNA, hurricanes, even how rabbits breed. They all follow the Fibonacci sequence and the golden ratio. It's almost like humans didn't invent math to describe the universe. It's like math was already the universe's native language, and we just found the dictionary. This is where physicist Sylvester James Gates Jr. comes in, and where things got a little overhyped. While working on string theory and something called supersymmetry, Gates and his team were mapping out equations using geometric diagrams called adinkras. Buried in those diagrams, they found patterns that looked exactly like error-correcting code, the same kind of stuff your web browser uses to stop your data from getting scrambled. Naturally, headlines went nuts. Physicist finds actual computer code inside reality. But let's slow down. That discovery lives inside one very specific, very theoretical corner of physics, supersymmetry. And supersymmetry hasn't even been confirmed yet, not by the Large Hadron Collider, not by anyone. So yeah, finding error-correcting math patterns in a theoretical framework is genuinely wild and worth studying. But it's not proof of an alien programmer. It just tells us the universe loves mathematical balance. That's it. Let's push this idea as far as it can go and look at the actual hardware problem. People love saying the universe saves memory by only rendering what we're looking at, just like a video game. But real physics doesn't work that way. Everything is tangled together. You can't just leave unobserved atoms unloaded because the big stuff, weather, evolution, chemistry, is all built on top of trillions of tiny quantum events happening whether anyone's watching or not. To simulate our universe properly, you'd need to track literally every particle in it, and there are roughly 10 to the power of 80 atoms in the observable universe. Trying to calculate the state and movement of that many particles in real time without the whole system melting down would take an insane, almost unthinkable amount of energy. There's also this concept physicists bring up called computational irreducibility. Some systems are so complicated that there's no shortcut, no cheat code to predict what happens next. The only way to know the outcome is to actually let it play out in real time. Which means to build a truly accurate simulation of our universe, you'd basically need a computer the size and mass of the universe. You'd need to build a whole universe just to fake one. So even if we are in a simulation, that doesn't actually solve anything. It just shifts the mystery back a step. Who built the universe hosting the computer that's simulating our universe? You haven't answered the question of existence, you've just kicked it down the road. If the science pushes back this hard against the simulation idea, why can't we let it go? Why does this theory have such a grip on us? Honestly, it comes down to how our brains evolved and our need for things to mean something. There's a survival trait scientists call the hyperactive agency detection device. Way back when early humans were out on the African plains, evolution favored the ones who overreacted to signs of danger. Hear rustling in the grass and assume it's just wind, but it turns out to be a lion? You're dead. Assume it's a lion when it's actually just wind? You're fine, just a little jumpy. So our brains got wired to look at randomness and chaos and immediately assume there's some hidden intention behind it. Simulation theory might just be that same ancient instinct dressed up in modern tech language. We look at the insane complexity of quantum physics and our brain screams, someone built this. But there's something deeper going on too. Simulation theory is kind of like religion for people who'd never admit to being religious. In a world where a lot of people have drifted away from traditional faith, we still crave that same comfort. The idea that there's a plan, a design, someone watching. It's basically techno-Gnosticism. It lets scientifically minded people quietly hold on to that old religious comfort without ever having to call it religion. God becomes the programmer. The soul becomes the base code. Heaven becomes base reality. Fate and karma become the source algorithm. Same old ideas, just wearing a new outfit. And honestly, it's a lot easier to swallow than the alternative. It's more comforting to think your struggles are part of some coded, monitored program than to accept the harder truth, that we might just be a random biological accident floating in a universe that doesn't know or care that we exist. Here's the thing about humans. We always compare the universe to whatever our newest, coolest invention is. Back in the 1600s, after clockwork got fancy, guys like Descartes said the universe was basically a giant clock. Then the Industrial Revolution hit, and suddenly the universe was a steam engine, all about pressure and heat. Now we're in the computer age, so of course the universe must be a computer. Feels a little predictable when you put it that way, right? That's kind of the arrogant part, if we're being honest, assuming the deepest structure of all existence just happens to match whatever gadget we built 30 years ago. The real answer is probably stranger than any of that, and a lot more humbling. The universe isn't a clock, it's not an engine, and it's almost certainly not a computer running in some alien's garage. We're just a young species still figuring out how to make sense of quantum weirdness and the sheer scale of the cosmos. The limits we keep bumping into, wave collapse, the speed of light, all these strange mathematical patterns probably aren't the edges of some digital cage. They're just the real, honest rules of a universe we're only just starting to actually understand. So, are we living in a simulation? Honestly, maybe that's the wrong question to ask. Whether this universe is made of physical matter or lines of cosmic code, one thing remains undeniably real. You are here, experiencing it. Every emotion, every realization, and every moment is yours. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the weird edges of reality, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment below. What do you think? Is this all just a render, or are we staring into the true face of the cosmos? Until next time, keep questioning the code.